Welcome to day 2 of our meeting. We wish to recognize honorable members who joined us yesterday, who could not be at the beginning of the meeting on account of flight delays. Allow me to give them an opportunity to introduce themselves. And as we proffer our sincere apologies for the inconveniences they experienced. Honorable Z, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. My name is Selemani Zedi, a member of parliament from Parliament of Tanzania, and I'm the member of this committee. Thank you.
Karibu sana.
Okay, good morning, everybody. My name is Honorable Richard Labos. I'm from the Republic of Seychelles, and I'm also a member of Public Accounts Committee in my country, and also the youngest MP is my country, and I'm very delighted to be here with you guys. Thank you.
Honorable Labos forgot to mention that he's very passionate about young people, himself being a young person. We serve on the same panel as mentors for the SADC Youth Parliament. So I know that it is his passion. Thank you very much and welcome. Honorable Sliver.
Oui, mesdames et messieurs, bonjour. Mon nom c'est Christophe Siliva Didio, député de Madagascar, et je suis content d'être ici parmi nous aujourd'hui, et je suis membre de ce comité. Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much, Honorable Sliver. Honorable Sliver, I know for sure that it's heated time in Madagascar with presidential elections coming, and we appreciate that you could still come to grace the meeting. So we wish to welcome the honorable members who are joining us. You lost a bit, but we will make sure that we tag you along. One of the ways in which we are going to do that is that we are going to do a recap of yesterday before we go into today's session, which is largely dedicated to groups. We will explain about that, but for now, I'll have the pleasure of inviting my colleague, Sophia from inter-parliamentary, to give us a summary of yesterday's proceedings. You have the floor, Sophia.
Thank you, Korasha. Honorable members of parliament, members of parliamentary administration, representatives of SADC Parliamentary Forum, our human rights experts, and everyone else joining this session online today. We will start the day with the quick recap of yesterday's sessions, as Korasha already mentioned. Then we will move forward with the group work discussions. We will continue with the presentation of the communiqué of our event and finalize with the concluding remarks. So let me start with, first of all, thanking our honorable speakers from the, thanking all our honorable speakers from the SADC region, national parliaments, and EU member states parliaments, experts of the field who have skillfully presented the key topics relevant to the parliament's engagement with human rights work and ensured and engaging discussions while presenting different perspectives and interesting examples and good practices from their respective countries and internationally. Critical role of parliaments in the protection and promotion of human rights has been a key topic of the workshop, and this has been reiterated many times during the interventions yesterday. Because parliaments represent different voices, majority and minority perspectives, it is their essential role to engage with the human rights, as it was mentioned during the discussions. Parliaments shall use their constitutional functions effectively to engage in the work in human rights. As it was mentioned, legislation related to human rights shall be scrutinized and considered by parliaments, It is the duty of the Parliament to ensure that any piece of legislation is compliant with human rights standards and it is compatible not only with the country's constitutions but also with the international ratified international treaties. It is also the responsibility of Parliament to oversee the government's implementation of national and international human rights obligations. In that regard, the speakers of yesterday's discussions also pointed out a more important role of the opposition that it plays in parliamentary work in general and particularly in the work on human rights in terms of hearing the voice of not only the majority but also other groups that are not in power. During the discussions, several issues and challenges were also highlighted, including the need to allocate sufficient resources to increase capacities in order to have parliamentary human rights and other relevant committees exercise their duties more effectively. The need to engage civil society and provide them with a space for meaningful participation was also emphasized as leading to Parliament taking well-informed decisions and adopting evidence-based policies. An interesting point was made about the parliamentary work being not only about members of Parliament deliberating, but also giving voice to NGOs, experts, academia, which is an important safeguard for creating legal framework free of human rights abuses, as it was mentioned by one of our speakers yesterday. Role of national human rights institutions, particularly as critical tools in the hands of Parliament, was also stressed out, specifically when it comes to the preparation of shadow reports to the UN human rights bodies, calling for a government's action and being vocal on any human rights violations in the countries. We also heard interesting examples on the mandate and functions of parliamentary ombudsmen, as well as the role of administration and committee staff in supporting MPs in their daily work on human rights. And finally, yesterday we had an opportunity to be introduced to two very important documents. On one hand, the SADC PF Principles and Guidelines for Parliaments in the Promotion and Protection of Human Rights and Inter-Pares Toolkit on Effective Human Rights Engagement for Parliamentary Bodies. Both toolkits set out key principles and framework for the parliamentary action in human rights area. Both toolkits are very much based on international standards. They provide a whole array of different parliamentary tools, and we believe that these documents will inspire the parliaments being represented here, but also others to strengthen their role and further work for the protection and promotion of human rights at national level. So this is a short recap of yesterday's session, and I will ask now Kurasha to continue with giving more the instructions, so to say, on how we proceed with our group work exercises. Thank you.
Honorable members, let's give Sophia a round of applause for that summary. I think she did a good job to summarize yesterday's proceedings, and in so doing, help our members who have joined to be on board in terms of what the proceedings of yesterday. We must now go into group work. I want to have the presentation visible on the board for members to follow. while we are doing that, maybe what I could also advise the House is that, as I said, the Secretary General has joined the meeting. She will be with us as we start the groups, and will also join us for the closing ceremony. And the Secretary General will deliver the closing remarks. Honorable members will remember that yesterday, due to an unforeseen development, the SG could not join us for the official opening session. Right, thank you very much. Now we are going to have, as per our program, two groups. One group is going to be hybrid, which means we are going to have members that are joining online, and others are going to be in the house. Then we are going to have a second group, which is going to be in person in another room, which we will advise in a moment. Group A, the hybrid session, will focus on the role of regional parliamentary bodies and regional governance institutions in fostering and advancing human rights. Group B will focus on parliamentary inclusion. Members of the Group A are Honorable Richard Labrose, Honorable Selemani Zedi, Honorable Utaramutu, Honorable Tsiliva, Honorable Lisedi, and then they will have co-rapporteurs of two staff of parliaments, Mr. Mpluki from Botswana and Dorothy Alawi from Namibia. Group B will have Honorable Mwalwanda, Honorable Jeronima, Honorable Beckman, Honorable Chikezi, and the chairperson, Honorable Nyabani. And the staff who are going to be rapporteurs in terms of capturing proceedings, Dr. Gwakwara from Zimbabwe and Mr. Dava from Mozambique. When you get into your groups, you will have a moderator. I will be privileged to moderate for Group A, and my colleague, Dr. Landilani Banda, will moderate Group B. However, when you commence business, you must delegate one of you, honorable members, to be the spokesperson of the group. So while staff will help you to capture proceedings for purpose of reporting for feedback, it is one of you who must present the feedback. When we come back, we reconvene in plenary. And the further guidance in terms of how we proceed will be through the moderators. Are there any questions? And our colleagues who are in the meeting who are not in the category of members and staff, please feel free to join any of the groups and benefit from the rich discussions that are going to take place. Are there any questions? We will be in groups from this is 10, yeah, from 10:30, which means in 5 minutes, until 12 o'clock. And then from 12:15 to 13:30, we will have lunch. And from 13:30, we reconvene back and have our feedback session. Then we'll proceed to have our closing ceremony. In the absence of any questions, I think we can proceed to go into groups. May I get guidance from my colleagues, Sophia and Paulina, in terms of where is Group B, the venue for Group B?
Yeah, Kurasha, while the people staying in this group will stay with you, I suppose, I can lead the Group B to another conference room, which is down the road, next, closer to the swimming pool area, so.
Thank you very much. If I had prior information, I would have loved to be with the group that is close to the swimming pool area because of the good memories of last night. But be that as it may, we will stay in this room as Group A, while Group B proceed to the other room, and Sophia and Paulina will usher us there. So, colleagues online, you are free to remain with the hybrid group, which is staying in this room. And let's then reconvene after lunch, and our moderators will make sure that we make effective use of time. Thank you very much, and we meet later on. Asante sana. So Group A, we will allow ourselves the next 4 minutes to get ready and we start at past.
for these activities. And now we had to reflect on how to do this smartly so that with the little means we have, we can achieve at least some impact. And the idea is, and this is the method behind all these human rights, practical human rights activities, so human rights actions.
And the one, you are the one doing for Group B? Okay. Then in that case, it means we must be ready. I see the chair is not yet in. DRC is probably going to fetch a few of the people. Let's give it another 2 minutes and then we go in. Just to advise that the communique will be shared after the event. We just want to make sure that we incorporate this last and very important session, which is talking about the feedback from the groups. And then after that, we'll move to the closing ceremony, wherein we will have the closing remarks by the Secretary General, Excellence Boyemo Sokoma, and Dr. Jonathan. And then we will end our meeting. So we will invite the spokesperson for Group A to come and present. Thank you very much. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurasha. Now, Group A had a task to look at 3 areas, in particular the practical challenges and innovative approaches to promotion and protection of human rights within the SADC region and European region, and how is it that the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, how is it being implemented in different countries within the region, sharing the best practices between parliaments within the region, and lastly, taking in part regional and parliamentary assemblies dealing with human rights, looking at the SADC Parliamentary Forum, the European Parliament Assembly, as 3 examples of regional bodies dealing with human rights. Now, the key issues that were addressed, the first question that went out to the members was, how are national parliament engaging in the work of SADC PF, and how does it contribute to the work of human rights? We then shared our experiences and challenges. So what was highlighted is in Seychelles, they are NGOs that are working and doing work of human rights, and they do participate with the various parliament of Seychelles. But however, the Member of Parliament addressed that there is a need to be capacitated to do their work, their challenges with that regard, and that the EU should engage with African countries to capacitate them on human rights issues. The lessons from Tanzania on how they used the model laws is that they enacted new laws in amending some of the existing laws. Using the SADC Parliamentary Forum model law on child marriages, they looked at they reviewed the legislation that looks at child marriage to increase the age from the age of 18 to 21. However, the Member of Parliament did state that there is a lot of work that still needs to be done in reforming the law, but however, changes will come within due course. Again, the Tanzanian nation did look at the election laws and how they are being reformed to introduce clauses that protect women and encourage women participation, which is one of the major issues in politics worldwide. Women participation should be enhanced and championed, and thank you, Tanzania, for your progressive reform. Another issue is that amendments are also being done on gender-based violence legislation to put in more strict laws and to ensure perpetrators are taken to account. Now, the Parliament of Tanzania has benefited immensely from the 3 model laws as they continue to domesticate these laws within their local legal frameworks. There is, however, a lot more that was stretched that needs to be done as amendments targeting specific clauses such as age specifics, while other clauses still remain unaddressed. There are too many clauses of the model law that are left out, and there is a need for, therefore, for a comprehensive approach to domesticating the SADC model laws. The other country from Namibia, the Parliament of Namibia looked at how, particularly the amendments of the Combating Rape and Domestic Violence bill, how the SADC model law on gender-based violence helped in terms of the participation from members of parliament, particularly the ones that took part in the construction of the gender-based violence model law and how they incorporated it in the law. They looked at the amendments to ensure that they are more strict and higher in terms of punishment for perpetrators in terms of the terms that they get in jail, the period that they get in jail, and what constitutes as rape. They stated that issues being such as the absence of semen and other bodily fluids should be withdrawn from courts by allowing them to draw conclusions from the absence of semen as a rape case did not take part. They also looked at to secure a convention by stipulating that a victim's character, sexual reputation, previous sexual conduct, or lack of physical injury during rape cannot be considered substantial or and compelling circumstances. So those were some of the issues that were highlighted by Namibia given to the gender-based, in relation to the gender-based violence module. Now, the challenges that Namibia raised is that there is the current model law on elections. However, discussions are still on the table within Parliament Relating to the issue, the clause that is within the election ECN bill and within the laws of Namibia structure in regarding to elections that prohibits public servants to be allowed to take part in democratic elections, as public servants are required to resign before they can even stand for an election. Therefore, they will be automatically suspended from parliamentary list, local authority list, if they do not resign. This hinders the very prime principle of members of parliament and members of public being able to partake in a free and democratic election. That is what is being championed by SADC PF, and those are some of the issues that we also took back home to address this issue that really affects the young population, who are the ones that are going to be economically suffering due to the high unemployment rate if they do not make it to public office. Another issue, and that same issue also was supported by Tanzania, but however, Tanzania did state that they had that issue, but however, due to legal reforms, now public servants are allowed to stand for elections and will only resign after they win their respective election. That is a very much progressive move by Tanzania, and it has been noted down by Namibia, and we will move forward and build a partnership in how to deal with this issue. The second question that we looked into is what can be done by SADC PF to further improve domestication of model laws and upholding of human rights, and how do parliaments engage with regional and international bodies? The country stated that in Seychelles, there is a human rights committee dealing with specific human rights issues, and that the SADC model law on human rights is currently being discussed with the intention to domesticate it in Seychelles. However, in the case of Namibia, they stated that there is no specific human rights committee, but human rights issues are being dealt cross-cutting through the various standing committees. They gave an example of the rights of small-scale miners that had a petition and a motion being tabled in Parliament that is currently jointly being investigated by the Natural Resources, Committee of Namibia, not particularly a human rights committee. So it's cross-cutting across all constitutions. But however, it was highlighted that they do have a committee on legal affairs and that is constitutional and legal affairs that is currently coordinating closely and working closely with the Ministry of Justice in terms of human rights issues. The resolution that was taken on this question came from Botswana, as they had a very much progressive form that they took part in terms of ensuring that they introduced an online course on human rights, which was free of charge, which is open to the general public. This is something that was also supported by the inter-PARES, as they also have a variety of courses, including one on human rights that they are rolling out currently. So this is something that was also discussed, and that should be dealt with as one of the main resolutions, because information sharing among participants, among members of the public in terms of what is your rights, where does your rights begin and where do your rights end, is imperative in ensuring that democracy is implemented swiftly within the countries. The third question was, what is the biggest challenge for parliaments in translating model laws into national laws and policies? Another issue that was brought up is capacity building is a challenge. There is a need for training in ensuring that how the transitioning of the models should be done, and is a drastic need, especially within the country of Seychelles. Another issue is that human rights promotion needs thriving democracies, and there is a need, therefore, to strengthen democracies as a human rights issue, and human rights cannot thrive within weak democracies. So there is a need as members of parliament, as governments, to review how democratic our government systems and legal systems are to ensure that human rights thrive within our various countries. Lastly, the model laws are not binding because there is a need to transform the SADC Parliamentary Forum into a regional parliament, as this will strengthen the forum and ensure compliance and domestication of its model laws. Now, a very important issue that was raised by one of the panelists from the European Parliament, he stated that there is sometimes conflicts are avoided because they have set an international standard within the parliament on what laws are being supported on an international level and in which all the countries follow, and perhaps the differences come more not on a member state basis, but comes in terms of family groups which are led by ideologies and different political standings, which is something that can also be looked into when we are ensuring that SADC PF becomes a legal and standing body, regional body that represents SADC's demands and SADC's laws. Thank you very much.
Before I open for additions, I want us to give a hand of applause in style. Order, honorable members. I'm going to order. I'm going to teach you how we do it in style. We are not going to do it anyhow, right? So the way we are going to give a hand of applause, raise your hands like this. So when I say drizzle, you go like this. When I say rain, you go like this. When I say thunder, you thunder. So we go drizzle, drizzle, rain, thunder, 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 thunder. Well done, Honorable. Right. So I wanted to open up for the group members to make any additions. I was privileged to be in the group, and with your concurrence, Madam Spokesperson, there are a few issues I could also highlight which came out. One of the things that was highlighted in terms of the current challenges around human rights work is the current environment of polarization, in part due to conflicts and geopolitical interests, which was resulting in a number of negative implications, such as the undermining of multilateralism, by extension regionalism, and therefore diminishing consensus which is necessary in advancing human rights. Was also noted that the polarization comes with selective application of human rights principles, sometimes very unhelpful and divisive narratives, and this puts at the core the role of Parliament as an institution that is an embodiment of diversity in society in advancing human rights. The other issue that came out as one of the challenges is the issue of national sovereignty of member states, which means that the implementation of human rights has to be a negotiated process in trying to balance the sovereign interests and rights of member states and the obligations to international law. The issue of political will, which could also be tied to issue of leadership, it was also one of the challenges that was highlighted. And of compliance and enforcement, you already alluded to, Honorable. I thought those also stood out as some of the issues that were highlighted by the group. Otherwise, thank you very much. We appreciate. Allow me to hand over to Honorable Marwanta, the spokesperson for Group B.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurasha. Group B attempted to answer several questions. The first question was asked that how many countries have rectified the Convention of the People with Disabilities. So it was found out that all 4 member countries which were present, DRC, South Africa, Zimbabwe, and Malawi, rectified to that convention. Zimbabwe has a new parliament. Zimbabwe has a new parliament building with all modern facilities to allow people with disabilities to use the facility properly. And Zimbabwe was one of the first countries to rectify the UN Convention on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities in 2013, and remain one of the few countries in Africa with registration that specifically caters for people with disabilities. DRC also has accessibility. The new law closes the legal gaps on the rights and obligations of people with disabilities and create an effective framework for the protection and promotion of the rights of persons with disabilities to ensure their full participation in national life. Mozambique also signed the UN Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities in its optional and protocol 10 on 30th November 2010, and subsequently rectified both on 31st December 2010. The second question was, are these facilities informed by law? In Malawi, it is informed by law, and there is a national construction organization which looks after all constructions in Malawi to make sure that all facilities have, all buildings have facilities to allow persons with disabilities to use them as the normal ones do. South Africa also in South Africa also they have the same, they provide lamps and lifts for persons with disabilities. In DRC, even albinism is tolerated in the country, and in DRC also have rights and equity. In Mozambique, it is a regulation that all buildings should have lamps for use for persons with disabilities. The sub-question which came was, are there specific people with disabilities, like incorporated into maybe people maybe we are working with together or who are using the facilities? In Malawi, indeed, as discussed above, it is incorporated because like in Malawi, we have the first person with albinism in our National Assembly as a member of parliament. In Zimbabwe, blind and others with physical impairments are taken care of, while in South Africa, visual impaired are given priority and sign languages is recognized, which means that in South Africa, they use sign languages and some visual aid or hearing aids are provided for people with those disabilities, I mean. DRC, languages are all held at the same level or platform. Access is informed by everything, including languages. All languages are given in the same level of importance. Is there any citizens' empowerment? Can bills or other facilities be accessed in Braille? In DRC, everyone has access to submit bills or prepositions, and all citizens have the right to submit their bills in Braille, etc. South Africa, audiobooks are made for those who have got hearing problems. And in Mozambique, many local languages are used so that they incorporate many people to use the information. Zimbabwe is putting in place access through printing hazards in Braille, and the constitution is being translated in 2 or 16 languages, which they have as their official languages in their National Assembly. Question 4 was, the number of people with disabilities is increasing. How can we improve accessibility for people with disabilities? Solution. Zimbabwe came with the solution that their parliament has been instrumental in enacting legislation that promotes and protects human rights. Notable examples include the Constitution of Zimbabwe Amendment number 20, which introduced significant changes to the country's constitution. It strengthened the protection of fundamental human rights and freedoms, including the right to life, equality, freedom of expression, and access to justice. DRC, publicized through radio and TVs, a provision of gadgets to assist those with hearing impairments. While in Mozambique, they work with partners to translate those laws into local languages. Sign language is also incorporated on the TVs, on TV channels. The 5th question was, what can Parliament do? From DRC, there are priorities interventions. Arms of the state, all arms of the state should put their heads together. Honest efforts should be made to improve accessibility for all. From Zimbabwe, access to information for all. Sign language officers are available at Parliament. As from Malawi, it will take time, but efforts are being made. DRC stressed the need to focus on the mandate of governments to deliver social services without diverting the funds. And resources should be used equitably. Question 6 was, why resources are not equitably distributed? There is a concern over the interventions by World Bank and IMF. They are not helping issues since they come in with a lot of conditionalities. For example, Zimbabwe is burdened by sanctions. Development cannot take place under restrictions. Question 7, presentation of women and minorities. From Mozambique. Mozambique has a huge number of women in parliament with the percentage hovering to 46%. While DRC, it's about 50% of representation by women. Zimbabwe amendment to include the women's quota and youth quota their constitution was amended to cater for women and youth. Zimbabwe amended its constitution to include 60% women parliamentarians to be elected on proposition representation, 6 from each of the 10 provinces from 2023 to 2033. Further, the amendment provides for the 30% of the total members of each local authority. Zimbabwe has also amended the constitution to provide for a youth quota of 5 female and 5 male young parliamentarians in the National Assembly. Whilst Malawi has got a male-dominated parliament, but there are efforts being made in this regard. what can be done. Let us not copy all jurisdictions, especially those from the West, but we need to see those which will bring positive values to our member states. Mozambique women have the potential and need to show their own potential. From Malawi, let us give the time to grow, gradualism. We also need to give the boy child their chance. Zimbabwe, let us give women and youth their chance. In conclusion, there is need to improve accessibility for all regardless of situation in life. Finally, we need to find sustainable interventions to ensure equitability for all, women, men, youth, and all people with disabilities. There is need to be complementarity in the efforts by men and women, and accountability needs to also be strengthened. Indeed, certain cultural aspects need to be revisited. Thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Mwalwanda. We again wish to give him a round of applause in style. And we drizzle, rain, 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 thunder, thunder, thunder. Thank you very much. The issue of inclusion stands at the center of human rights. We embrace the mantra of the United Nations, leaving no one behind. Unless the rights of both the majority and minority are realized, it is difficult to attain the spirit of human rights. I was quite encouraged by what SADC PF did at the last public hearings, when we had, for the first time in the history of the institution, we had sign language interpretation being given to make sure that in the spirit of inclusion, indeed, persons with disability are also given an opportunity to access platforms where they can interact with policymakers. At this juncture, allow me to open for any additions from group members. I do not see any hand being raised, wishing to take the floor. This brings us to conclusion with regards to the feedback from our groups and from the quality and diversity of issues that have been presented by representatives of the groups. It is very clear that the groups indeed served as a useful platform for engagement. I don't know if any of the colleagues online would wish to make any additions with regards to the submissions by both Group A and Group B. Colleagues who are hosting the meeting, you will let me know if there is any hand from someone wishing to make any contributions. It does not look like there is any. That must see us move to the last section of our program, which is the closing ceremony. And at this juncture, I have the honor of inviting one of the leading voices when it comes to championing human rights, particularly supporting the work of parliaments as agents for human rights promotion and defending. The whole essence of the role of model laws and other reference instruments as tools that are available for parliaments and parliamentarians to champion human rights got its meaning under a leadership. We have seen increasing acknowledgement of the growing role of SADC PF in terms of contributing to the regional Bill of Rights in the SADC region, both to regional law, but also to the regional Bill of Rights under a leadership. And I wish to recognize Madam Secretary General, Her Excellency Boyemo Sokhoma, and invite her to take the floor and deliver her closing remarks. Over to you, SG.
Thank you very much, Mr. Kurasha, for those kind words. Honorable Aisha Adams, Member of Parliament, the Second Deputy Speaker of the Parliament of Malawi, representing the Right Honorable Catherine Gotani Hara, Speaker of the Parliament of Malawi, Honorable Tendai Nyabani, Chairperson of the SADC Parliamentary Forum Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights, Honorable members of the SADC Parliamentary Forum Standing Committee on Democratization, Governance and Human Rights in your diversity, members from National Parliament of EU member states joining us online, Mr. Ivo Hofkins, Head of Cooperation, European Union Delegation to the Republic of Malawi, Dr. Jonathan Murphy, Head of Programs, Inter-Pares International IDEA, Dr. Roba Sharamo, Regional Director for Africa and West Asia, International IDEA, joining us online, distinguished resource persons and experts, SADC Parliamentary Forum staff, in whom I trust, and the national parliaments, citizens joining us online from across the globe, if any, ladies and gentlemen, honorable members. I believe it is a shared feeling that this has been one of the most two productive days of a workshop that you've attended. You have been enlightened, at least I have been enlightened on several key issues, in particular on the momentous role which can be leveraged by yourselves as members of parliament have been an area that you have been discussing. And we've also discussed the role of leave from and address human rights governance. One of my reflection, however, in closing, I wish to highlight that this workshop has revealed the highly complex issue, as well as the emotive and yet difficult issues that are met by stakeholders. From one of our members, we have also learned that in certain circumstances in the House, mitigating a member's intervention may be perceived as interfering with the freedom of expression or public interest, while in other cases, deliberations from members of parliament from anti-rights, anti-gender, or other persuasions made under the cloak of parliamentary immunity may amount or may be interpreted or perceived as discriminatory, among others. Honourable members, we agree that often the right balance needs to be struck. And this is nothing that we'll go to school for, and this is a matter of conscience. This is a matter of commitment and appreciation of the framework that which we've been discussing. In addition, we have learned that different countries or geographical regions may have dissimilar perspectives on what human rights enforcement should entail. The ill treatment of prisoners, for instance, honourable members, can indeed be a human rights issue, as well as difficulties encountered by an ombudsperson to meet justice for citizens. Honourable members, faced with all the lessons which we have been favoured with during these 2 days, I wish to distill a few takeaway points in view of inciting further reflections on the role of parliaments in human rights advancements. Let me start with my first point, which I entitled the prioritization of governments. Firstly, I'd like to say that there's a need for countries to prioritize the sector they want to enhance with respect to a human rights framework. Here, there's no one-size-fits-all formula. Since socio-economic human rights depend on the availability of resources, countries will need to prioritize whether to invest in education, whether to invest in housing, whether to invest in prison facilities, whether to invest in health or food security, among others. However, honourable members, this prioritization cannot be left to arbitrariness. It is incumbent on parliaments as an independent institution to carry out a balancing exercise and to determine where the investment would be most needed and would it yield greater benefits or where it should yield greater benefits in any case of area of interest. This can be done through a parliamentary committee on human rights or through wide stakeholder consultation, which involves members of parliament. At the end of the day, honourable members, it is for parliament to hold government to account on the priority which would best meet the demands of the citizens. Having said this, parliaments as institutions should also be able to protect the human rights of minorities, since these may not have the required parliamentary quorum to protect their specific interests. And I say this repeatedly, honourable members, often we deal with issues of the tyranny of the majority, and I felt it is important for me to highlight this issue. For instance, issues relating to the protection of key populations, issues related to the protection of the opposition, issues related to lesbians, gay, bisexual, transgender, intersex, and queer populations regarding the prevention of HIV/AIDS accordingly need specific attention. And I raise these issues because they're emotive, while appreciating that the landscape in our countries is varied. But at the core, we must respect humanity, including issues of gender-based violence. Secondly, let's look at the nature of human rights and reflect on how they vary over time. I'll add that the nature of human rights may vary over time. If 30 years ago, capital punishment was seen as a violation of the right to life, it may well be possible that life sentences for prisoners may equally be tantamount to a human rights violation in the contemporary context. Other issues which call for variance is the treatment of prisoners. Should prisoners have access to a library of books, or is this too much liberty? Should they be able to play music or be given musical instruments of their choice during their resting hours? Should prisoners be allowed to watch television? Should there be a greater focus on rehabilitation rather than admonishment? And if yes, how should it go? We do not have precise answers to these questions. Yes, they incite reflections about how the notion of human dignity may vary over time and how we want our society to evolve into the future. Only visionary parliamentarians will be credited for any changes or respect in such instances. Nowadays, honorable members, human rights discourse is even evolving towards the right to broadband connectivity, since access to the internet is closely intertwined with access to education. My point, honorable members, here is that human rights are not static in nature, and they will necessarily evolve over time in pace with greater standards for human dignity and decency. It is the duty of members of parliament to evaluate the changes over time and ensure that the legislative framework adapts to enhance standards of human rights protection. Honorable members, my third point here is how can parliaments overcome lack of justiciability of rights? I'd like to add that although socioeconomic human rights are not justiciable or enforceable in most countries, parliaments can still implement them through budgetary oversight and representative initiatives. For instance, pushing for greater budgets to build hospitals and buy screening equipment that would assist to advance the right to health. Ensuring that a budget is provided for teachers to be hired to work in remote locations will promote the right to education. Advocating for a decrease in carbon emissions by industries and households will be implementing the right to a clean environment or greening our legislation. Even though these rights cannot be litigated, that is, be actioned in court, parliaments can still hold the executive to account on these issues, since they are reflected through budgets and government programs that are submitted to the scrutiny of parliaments. Parliaments should not lose sight of its power to exercise checks and balances on the executive, and there's a need to build the capacity of members of parliament and staff of parliament to do this effectively. The other one, honorable members, that you've spoken about is the need for North-South cooperation. I'd like to say that there's a dire need for a harmonization of understanding regarding human rights treaties and how they need to be domesticated, thereby bringing greater justiciability of rights. The deliberations that you've had over the past 2 days demonstrate clearly that there's only one human population, and thus there cannot be human rights which are applied differently from one continent to the next. There's a need to develop North-South collaboration to a greater extent in view of ensuring that there's harmonization of understanding of human rights treaties and how they need to be interpreted to speed up the domestication process. I wish to emphasize, honorable members, that the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, as well as the International Covenants on Civil and Political Rights and Economic and Social Cultural Rights, all envisage that human rights be applied globally in the same manner. Model laws developed by the Forum, human rights guidelines developed by the Forum have proved to be a valuable catalyst and have provided a basis for us to leverage our power from. These can be catalysts to spearhead domestication and would be keen to see further investment in these instruments of Bill of Rights in relation to topics that are still unexplored, as well as for domestication strategies of existing model laws. Honorable members, in this regard, I invite partners to collaborate profusely with the Forum under the auspices of the Regional Parliamentary Model Laws Oversight Committee, the Democratization and Human Rights Committee, among others, which are flagship domestication organs of the SADC Parliamentary Forum. In the years to come, we want to develop a SADC model law on prison oversight, as well as a model law on the rule of law and constitutionalism. and we are currently open to receiving interest from partners to support these noble initiatives. As the SADC Parliamentary Forum updates its partnership metrics for the next 5 years, we will be keen to develop robust partnerships that can assist our parliamentary organs to tackle model lawmaking, guideline making more effectively, thus also impacting on the domestication of human rights treaties. Honorable members, I hope our partners and resource persons will take on this clarion call. Dear colleagues and distinguished honorable members, I hope that the takeaway points I've just mentioned will be useful to drive reflection forward. I wish to end these remarks by saying that the tools for domestication of human rights are now available and are within reach. I'm confident that this workshop has ignited the necessary momentum for us to go back and push for parliamentary delivery around issues of prioritization of government agendas. And the other takeaway points I've just mentioned. I end by thanking the co-organizers, notably the Parliament of Malawi, the European Union, Wade Parliaments, Inter-Pares and International IDEA. Your sterling contributions have undeniably assisted to shape the human rights landscape of Southern Africa and beyond. It has also contributed to the development of our strategic plan in terms of the areas that we should zero in on. With these, I wish to thank you, honorable members, and invite you to note that the forum transforming into a parliament need not be neither here nor there. The issue is we have already acceded and signed to these human rights treaties. The forum remains a vehicle, whether a parliament or a forum. And with these words, honorable members, our commitment to human rights should not be wavered in any way. I thank you and wish to thank Shonene and Paulina for driving this process and ensuring that it is seamlessly delivered. Honorable members, I wish you a good evening in this regard.
We do what we do because we are stepping on the shoulders of a giant. One thing that you can never fault the SG for is lack of conviction and commitment on the work that she does. For the time I have known her, she's a person of action, and her speech embodies that commitment to taking action. Thank you very much, SG. We are inspired, we are guided. Allow me to invite the House as we give you a round of applause in style. And we wish to drizzle, we drizzle, let it rain, let it rain, let it rain, thunder, thunder, thunder. Thank you very much, SG. We miss you in Malawi, but you are with us in spirit. I wish to invite Dr. Jonathan. I always joke with him and I ask, but where is Jonathan without David? And then yesterday he let out something. He has actually named his son David. So to confirm that indeed Jonathan remains a friend of David. Jonathan, you have the floor.
Thank you very much indeed, Karasha, for those kind words. I hope my son David considers me a friend. I'll check afterwards. Honourable Chairman, Honourable Secretary General, Honourable members of Parliament from the different countries of Southern Africa, members of the Southern African Development Community Parliamentary Forum, thank you very much for making often a difficult and even longer journey than you anticipated to come and share your knowledge and your experience about parliaments and human rights. I would also like to thank the various participants who joined us over the past 2 days from different European Union member state parliaments and from the European Parliament to share their experiences and their practices. And I think that the experiences they shared were in many, many cases very similar to the experiences that you as members of national human rights, as parliamentary human rights committees, as members of this SADC PF committee that addresses human rights, the experiences are the same in many cases. And of course they're the same because we human beings are born equal and we will leave this world equal. We had very, very rich dialogue about some of the achievements, some of the challenges, some of the opportunities for collaboration, and some of the difficulties that Madam Secretary General mentioned in terms of finding common human rights standards in diverse countries, diverse societies. How do we at the same time respect universal human rights and also respect human diversity? This is a question, a challenge that will never be resolved, but it's a dialogue that needs to continue to take place. I'd like to thank the SADC PF administrative team, of course, headed from Windhoek by Madam Secretary General, but particularly the colleagues on the ground, Kurasha and Paulina, who have done a wonderful job in making this event, I think, a great success. I'd like to thank all of the experts who have participated both here and also online in making the event so rich. I'd like to thank my colleague Sophie from Inter-Pares. This is her first international event, and she has taken on a very heavy burden, and I would like to thank her very much for all of her efforts working with the team from SADC PF to make this such a success. I'd like to make a few final points. I couldn't possibly hope to match the eloquence of Madam Secretary General, but in my own way, I'll make a few much more prosaic points. The first one is to recognize and underline the leadership role of SADC PF in promoting Parliament's role in fostering and in strengthening human rights. The guidelines that on parliaments and human rights that have been developed by SADC PF and particularly developed by this committee demonstrate once again SADC PF's leadership internationally in terms of best practices in human rights. And of course, the leadership of this region, of the Southern African region, in terms of democracy within the continent of Africa in particular. As we have already discussed, democratic parliaments are fundamental to ensuring the protection of human rights. In fact, human rights are unthinkable without effective democratic parliaments. We know that parliaments are first of all responsible for transforming international human rights treaties and commitments, international law. Parliaments also establish a national legislative framework on human rights. And as we heard from various examples from the different countries represented here today, parliaments frequently are responsible for the nomination of the National Human Rights Institution, and the National Human Rights Institution itself often reports to Parliament. That brings us to the role of Parliament in terms of oversight of human rights, both independently and through national human rights institutions. Parliaments are responsible for ensuring that human rights protections that exist within national law are indeed respected by the government of the day. And here I want to repeat a point that I made earlier that I think is extremely important. And that is that a specific reason why parliaments are crucial for human rights is because parliaments are the state institution where the diversity of citizens is represented, meaning that parliaments cannot turn a blind eye to human rights abuses that may occur in one corner of the country or in regard to one segment of the population, because those people, representatives of those people, are represented in Parliament. And therefore, without effective democratic parliaments, human rights are indeed on very shaky ground. I would like to end by saying that human rights, of course, are universal. And as Kurasha has said, even in an era of growing international tensions, where many countries in the world, including in Africa, including in Southern Africa, seem to be joining one team or another in the geopolitical battle, we must remember that whichever side we appear to be attracted to, our human rights remain the same, that we need to and we must work together, whatever our political differences, to ensure that all citizens in our countries are treated with dignity, have what is required in order to live a quality of life. And that goes way beyond politics. That has to do with the meaning and the respect of human life. I know that a communique from this excellent meeting is being finalized and will be distributed amongst you. I would like to say on behalf of Inter-Pares, the European Union's global program for parliamentary strengthening, that we are delighted with the partnership that we are developing, that this is the first fruit of with SADC PF. I have worked in parliamentary development for over 25 years now, and I have known the excellent work of SADC PF on strengthening parliaments in the region, and was delighted when Kurasha told me that he had been involved in one of the very, very early efforts to establish indicators for democratic parliaments, which SADC adopted before most other places in the world. And so this is an organization with a rich and proud history, as Madam Secretary General mentioned, with the plan and the passion to transform itself into a parliamentary assembly. We hope that happens, but as Madam Secretary General said, SADC PF in whatever form will continue to be here, and we look forward to working closely with SADC PF on our shared priorities. Thank you very much indeed, honourable members and ladies and gentlemen.
Let it drizzle, 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 rain, rain, thunder, thunder, thunder. Thank you very much, Jonathan, for very pointed observations. One thing that I have liked from day one of our partnership is the clarity and results-orientedness with which Jonathan and his team operate. We did not have to spend a lot of time with pleasantries when we reached out to each other to initiate this partnership. And it is something that we wish to grow as part and parcel of the culture of the partnership. I like the salient observation you make, and allow me to quote: whichever side we might seem to be attracted to, so this is in the context of the ongoing polarization, geopolitics, alignment. Whichever side we seem to be attracted to, human rights remain. And the commitments there too also remain. I couldn't have said it any better time. It reminds me of the words of the former chairperson of this committee and a luminary in his own right, the current president of Seychelles, Honorable Ramkalawan, at the peak of COVID-19, when parliaments were trying to figure out what role they should play, particularly when it had become apparent that the lockdowns were also having serious ramifications on human rights, while necessary for health and safety. And he remarked and said, whatever form of lockdown we implement, let us not lock down democracy. Let us not lock down human rights. So whatever pleases our countries in terms of alignment in the geopolitics, one thing must be common: our commitment as parliamentarians to human rights. And for me, this is what this is all about. I would want to end by acknowledging members of the DG HR committee. I've been working with national parliaments for nearly 18 years now. And I want to put it on record that it is not every time when you work with parliaments and parliamentarians and they have the level of commitment and respect and professionalism that we experience with this group of parliamentarians. We do not take it as for granted as staff, and we appreciate that you allow us to facilitate you in the work that we do. We look forward we take your work. We really are humbled and would wish to put it on record. We sincerely appreciate. I'm sure I speak on behalf of my colleague Paulina, who is usually in more direct contact with all of you before you come to meetings. Us to be available to attend to any administrative matters related to your departures. We are grateful to our host parliament, the Parliament of Malawi. We have staff seconded to service this mission. And is Spiwe in the room? Spiwe and colleagues. Officers attached to the mission, to this meeting, which means they will make sure that we are facilitated up to the point of no return at the airport when we will be leaving. And we are grateful for that. Paulina is available. We communicate through the group, through WhatsApp, if there is anything that requires urgent attention. Paulina, is there anything else that we may need to alert members to before we adjourn?
Good afternoon, everyone. The airport pickup is
Thank you very much.